You are now listening to an exclusive interview with the baddest man on the airwaves, Mr. Saturday Night.
Hello.
Hello, Carl. It is me, Mr. Saturday
Mike,
Night.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. Listen, I want to say thank you and welcome for being our celebrity guest star this evening.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
It's completely my pleasure. And I'm gonna use a word you don't hear often. Giddy. I am crazy giddy about having you on the show. You are such a part of. So I was probably early teens in the '60s, and you are just a huge part of the fabric of my life.
Oh, well, that's so nice to hear. Thank you so much. I love hearing that because, I hear that from different people at different times, and it always makes me feel very grateful and happy that we could be a part of someone's life, the fabric of their life, make a difference. And we're grateful to still be going after all these years.
And you know what? 2025 is a huge year for you. It is the 60th. Can't believe it. Well, actually, I can if you do the math, but the 60th anniversary of the Buckinghams as a performing and touring band, that is a huge, huge deal. So I would ask you, how's that feel to you?
Well, it feels wonderful. I mean, I can't believe that it's
right?
60 years. Somebody sent me, actually my publicist, Don Lee Wakefield, sent me a little clip from when we did our 30th anniversary. And at the end of the clip, I said, you hear me saying, 30 years. Well, I don't think we'll be doing this in another 30 years.
Yes, you will.
And here we are, And it's pretty remarkable, that time goes by so quick, and it's been wonderful, ever since Nick Fortuna and Nick is the original bass player from the Buckinghams, and him and I kept the music going, and we started, we resumed the Buckinghams performing again around 1982, I think it was, because we didn't play at all in the 70s. Once the original band broke up in 1970, and so there was that period of time when we were all doing different things. But ever since then, we've been keeping it going, and thank God for the audience and the fan base that we have. They've been so supportive through the years that we're still out there performing.
Oh, you're on. You gotta be. Well, I mean, third, fourth generation, right? I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, you've got teenagers at your concerts that clearly know the words to the songs, right?
Yeah, well, that is exciting. That always puts a smile on my face to see young people. We'll be doing the autograph thing after the show and the meet and greets, and you see a long line, and then every so often there's little groups of younger people, and it's like, wow, they're embracing this music for various reasons. I mean, they love the songs, the music. Somehow they connected with them, but sometimes it's their parents or it's someone's friend that turned them on to it or whatever. But we'll take it any way we can get it. It's great to have these.
Hey, listen, the next couple of weeks are going to be crazy for you. First, I think you're a fan. Chicago Auto Show, February 8th through the 15th. Is that a big deal for you?
What show is that?
The auto show in Chicago.
Oh, the auto show. It sure is for me. I'm a car guy. I mean, when I was in high school, I went to this particular high school that was sort of prepared you for going to college and being a design, especially what I wanted to do was be design cars. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to, that before the music business hit me, I was, really a car enthusiast, wanted to be a designer, I dreamed about going to Italy and working for Ferrari or something, and perfect. Just design. I was really always into cars. I was just a car guy that loved that whole aspect of automobile designs and so forth. And so that's what I thought I was going to do. But then I started playing in a band and in the middle of high school, and and things started to happen, and we had a band, and things were going crazy, and by the time I was a senior, Kind of a Drag came out. And, it was the number one record in the country, and I was still a senior in high school.
Oh, I cannot imagine. I mean, how did that even feel? I mean, was it surreal, so to speak? Or did, I don't know. I mean, that's got to be crazy.
It was surreal. It was crazy. Unfortunately, I went to a high school that was all boys. It was a boys' school. So I couldn't, it didn't help me out with the ladies. Didn't help me out with the ladies much. I had to go hang out at other high schools, to meet the girls. But it was pretty crazy. I mean, I started playing in a band in the middle of high school, and I was already making a living from making a couple $100 on weekends and performing around Chicago. And, it was great to have that. And Chicago was such a great city to grow up in the music business, because we had so many great venues to perform at, a lot of dances and teen clubs. And there was a lot going on. And that's what you cut your teeth on, was doing that. So it was pretty remarkable.
So in high school, like, were you sitting in class? Did you date? I can only imagine. Were you sitting in class daydreaming, and you have a pencil and you're sketching cars? Was that a thing?
Yeah, well, I was, I was in automobile design, and in the architectural class too. It all sort of went together, and that's what we were doing. But I got totally distracted once I picked up the guitar. Well, I started playing the guitar when I was about 13 years old. But by the time I was in the middle of high school, and my cousin called me and asked me to join his band. He was putting a band together, and that changed everything. Then then I said, "Well, this is kind of cool," and it was fun. I was kind of a shy kid, and it was an opportunity to meet girls. It really was. I mean, they would come to you when you were in a band.
Right.
They wanted to meet you, so that made it a lot easier. So I was excited about that. That was fun to do. I didn't know, in 1964. I mean, when the Beatles came along, and I just embraced that like crazy. We all wanted to be the fifth Beatle. I mean, it changed everything. It changed my life musically. I embraced that so much, and it was an experience that that was life changing. And, I realized at that point that I wanted to make music. I wanted to be in a band and make it happen. So we were very fortunate that I connected with a bunch of the right guys, and things moved forward,
It's funny, as we talked to a number of your crews and tour colleagues, so recently Tommy James, Ron Dante, Andy Kim, they all, you all share that fearless mid-teens, I'm going to teach myself guitar, and I'm going to get in a band, and then magic happens, and I can't even imagine. I mean, I think Andy Kim left Montreal at 14 with $40 in his pocket and went to New York, and it's like, how does that even happen? I'm blown away by your story.
Well, you mentioned Tommy James and Ron Dante. They're both dear friends, and I've been on the Happy Together tour for many years, on and off, and Ron Dante's on the tour, as he's a regular guy on that, and he's a remarkable guy. He's very talented, very creative, one of the nicest people I ever met. And Tommy James too. I've known Tommy since the '60s, and we still do shows with him, and he's just a remarkable entertainer, and the songs that he wrote, and he still plays at a very high level, and it's always great to do a show, be on the same bill with him, So those guys were a big influence, and they're a big part of the biz. But I mean, it's remarkable.
You are no one should be surprised to know you're a highly successful songwriter and solo artist. Hold On to Your Dreams, Little Something, and Circle Game. You have a lot going on personally and professionally, which we'll get to, but let's take just a moment and let me take you back. This is your life. Let's go back to obviously the setting is Chicago. So this would be late 1965. You're in a band called the Pulsations, correct?
That is correct. Absolutely.
And you get, I don't know how, but you get a job as the house band on WGN TV's variety show called All Time Hits. How did that happen?
Well, what happened was, the Pulsations were going. I joined the Pulsations, left another band I was in, and joined Dennis Tufano and John Polis and George LeGros and those guys. And, we were together maybe a couple months playing around Chicago as the Pulsations. And our manager, we had a manager, his name was Carl Bonifetti. Mm-hmm. And Carl was, boy, what a go-getter. He was a hard worker. He was quite a promoter. He used to spin records also at the local dance place called the Holiday Ballroom. So he took an interest in us and managed us. And he got us an audition on WGN TV, which at the time, it was a super station. It was syndicated.
Huge.
So whatever station, whatever played on GN kind of played around the country in different markets. So it was a great exposure. So he got us the audition for this new show that was coming out called All Time Hits, and a variety show. And, we were kind of the token rock band. We won the audition, and they loved the band, but they didn't like the name. They didn't go for Pulsations, So we made friends with a guy who was a security guard on the show. His name was John O'Pager. And John came up with a few names, and one of them was the Buckinghams. And we were like, wow, well, that's cool because, it kind of ties in the British invasion is happening, and we couldn't believe nobody was using that name. So, okay, let's call ourselves the Buckinghams. And the people at WGN agreed. The producer agreed on that. And so we, from the get-go, the very first show we did was we were called the Buckinghams. And the name stuck, of course. And we did the show. It was September of 65. And we did show for 13 weeks, and it was great exposure. I mean, it was, played in a lot of markets, and that's what sort of it was a catalyst for getting us off the ground.
Do you happen to remember, as the Buckinghams, what the very first Chicago venue was where you performed together as a band?
As the Buckinghams?
Yeah.
I would say the Holiday Ballroom.
Okay, fair.
It was the first venue that we played as the Buckinghams. Yeah, that was the northwest side of Chicago. Lawrence and Elston Avenue, or Lawrence and Milwaukee, whatever that is, right along there, the north. And that was it was a regular place. I used to go there before I was even playing in the band. I would, you'd go there to dance and to meet girls and have a good time, and that was one of the in places in Chicago at the time.
What is there now? Please don't tell me it's a supermarket.
You know what? I think it's a bus station.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah, I think it is. We play in that area occasionally. There's a big festival in Chicago that Chicago Special Events puts on. Right in that neighborhood, they do a big summer festival in the summertime, and we have played right in that area in recent years.
Oh, cool.
When we play, but yeah, the old Holiday Ballroom is gone, and it was run by the guy who owned it and ran it. His name was Dan Belloc, and Dan took an interest in us. He's the guy that when we got a record deal after All Time Hits, he got us in the studio at the old Chess Studios on South Michigan Avenue, which of course is very famous for a lot of blues artists. But he brought us in there, and he produced several, cover songs we recorded, but he produced Kind of a Drag. And he was our producer, and it was his idea to put the horns on the track. We weren't a horn band up to that point, but he just thought, hey, the horns could be a great addition to your sound. And so Dan Belloc was a big band leader. He had an orchestra, so he tapped on his trombone player. His name was Frank Tazinski. Frank wrote the charts for the horns, and we put horns on the song, and of course we know what that sounds like. And by February of '67, Kind of a Drag was the number one record in the country.
I don't know if there's any debate about this, Carl, or not, but would you say, is it fair to say that the horns ended up influencing other bands like Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears? Is that fair?
Oh, it's definitely fair to say. Talking about Chicago, there was a club in Chicago called Barnaby's, down on the street. It was a very popular club. And there was a house band there called The Big Thing. And, the Buckinghams in '67, we'd be on tour. We must have played 300 dates that year. We'd come back in town, and we'd want to relax and hang out a little bit, and that was a favorite place we would go to. And there was this band playing there, The Big Thing, and horn band, and they had original material along with all their cover material. We thought these guys were just outrageous. They were so good.
Oh, yeah.
And we kept trying to talk at that time, we had switched managers. James William Guercio was managing and producing us. And we would tell him, hey, you got to come in and hear these guys, because you could get a record deal for them, whatever. And, we had a lot going on, especially with us. And, it took a while to get him to come in and listen. And he finally connected with those guys, and he brought them out to L.A. and, changed their name. They eventually went from being called CTA to Chicago, and so, we all know the success Chicago had. I mean, it's unbelievable, on what level all the hits they had. But, it's a wonderful feeling to know that we had a little something to do with that. I mean, if nothing else, we suggested that Guercio bring them into L.A. and get them a record deal with Columbia, and he did, and, the rest is history,
I cannot.
And you mentioned other ag, Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Sure.
Al Cooper has said in articles, I've read articles that he said that he got the idea for Blood, Sweat, and Tears from listening to our first Columbia album, which was Time and Charges, was the album we did. And it had a very heavy horn sound, almost symphonic. There was a lot of going on in those tracks. And it gave him the idea to put together Blood, Sweat, and Tears, So, so that, I guess we were a bit of an influence on those guys.
Would not surprise me a bit. I could not imagine what, to you, the year 1967 felt like. I mean, we'll get into it, but let's start off with Billboard magazine calling you the most listened to band in America for the entire year. That blows my mind. It really does.
That blows my mind too. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? That's I mean, at 67, we had hits. They started late in '66 and it overlapped into '68 when we did Susan and the Ed Sullivan Show and so forth. But '67, the Summer of Love, that was a magical year for us. I mean, that was and to be thought of as the most listened to band. We had a lot of hits in that year. It's pretty incredible. It really is.
And think who shared those charts with you. I mean, there is some serious talent in 1967, and to rise to the top is huge.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was a lot going on, and I used to be blown away when I'd see our song, say it's number 2 or whatever, and there'd be a Beatles song, right behind it or right in front, to be on the charts, and you started thinking to yourself, God, I wonder if Paul McCartney or John Lennon is looking at the billboard and wondering, well, who are these guys, and it was just a wonderful feeling, to be a part of that. And of course, a lot of the bands that, the Turtles were making hits back then, and
sure.
And there were just so many, Tommy James, and it was just, there were so many great artists on the charts at that time. I mean, I'd say too many to even think of to repeat. It's just it was a wonderful time to make music.
As you mentioned, Carl, kind of a drag, your first charted hit. The band Mob gave it to you?
Well, Jim Holvey, who wrote with another guy, I think he did lyrics to Jim Holvey and Weisbier. They were writing songs together. And Jim Holvey gave us that song. And Jim played in a band called The Mob. And I still connect. I'm still connected to Jim. We talk once in a while, and he's a talented guy, and he was a great songwriter, and he's a really good guitar player, great guitar player and singer, in that band. But he wasn't right. He was writing songs that weren't right for that band. They were more of an R&B band, a soul group. They used to call him Jimmy Soul. So he's writing these pop tunes, and we were looking for we weren't songwriters at the time, and we were looking for an original song to record. And our manager at the time, Carl Bonifetti, knew Jim Holvey, so he tapped on him. He says, "Jim, do you have any songs that the Buckinghams could record?" And he went over to his, I don't know if it was his hotel room or his house, and Jim says, "Well, I got this one song that they might like it, And he was strumming on his guitar that wasn't even plugged in. It was an electric guitar, I think it was. And Carl Bonifetti had a tape player, a reel-to-reel player, and with a microphone on it, and he put it up to the guitar and his voice, and Jim sang the song to him, and kind of a drag when your baby don't love you. He had the strumming the guitar, and so he did the whole song, and Carl recorded it, and he brought it to us. And we were like, well, that's a nice song. I wonder what we could do with it. I don't know. It's an original. It's got something to it. So, we rehearsed. We were always rehearsing in one of our parents' house basements. We were down in my parents' basement rehearsing the song, coming up with an arrangement. And I remember my mother coming down, and I think she had some treats for us or something to eat or whatever. And she came down. She says, I've been listening to you guys rehearse this song, and there's something special about that song. It's got something. It's really, really catchy, And we didn't think much of it, and we recorded. We rehearsed it until we had it down, and then we went into the studio and recorded it. And like I said, Dan Belloc had the idea to add horns to it. And so we recorded it, and it was mixed and everything, and we thought it was really a nice song. We didn't know it would be a hit. And so USA Records finally released it, and oh my God, it took off overnight.
I just want to stop you for a second. Did I read somewhere, Carl, that you had to argue with the record company to even release it?
That's true. We gave them the song, and they liked it. They moderately accepted it. They were like, I don't know, they were a little laid back about it. And I think it took a couple months for them to finally say, okay, we'll put it out there, see what happens. And I don't know. Their people, their A&R, they weren't hearing hit record at the beginning, but they finally put it out there, and it just took off. I've had many radio DJs and personalities tell me that, you're in the business. They would play 100 records a week or whatever, and they'd put it on for 30 seconds, and if it didn't grab them, they'd throw it in a corner and go to the next one.
It's so terrible, but true.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when Kind of a Drag started, it just grabbed them right away, and they went, wow, this is different, And then they played through the whole thing, and the rest is history. It just took off. Then they started playing it. Before you knew it, we had a hit. Wow.
I think, I'll use Motown as an example. I think it was kind of a rule or a thing where all their songs, they had to get you in the first 5 seconds. It was that competitive, or they're moving on. So everything was kind of written with that in mind, and obviously you had a hit. The band in 1967 then produced 4 more top 20 hits. huge. Don't You Care? Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. Hey Baby, They're Playing Our Song, which has become, I'll call it a timeless anthem. And then Susan. Is it true that the song Susan was written backstage? You tell the story. Is it about a server downstairs? Does that ring a bell?
Well, let me say this. That's another Jim Holvey song. And, Jim, I think he was in love with this girl. Her name was Susan. And, when he wrote Kind of a Drag, Don't You Care, Susan especially, those songs, it was about the same girl.
Oh.
And she broke up with him, and I guess he was in a bad place when he wrote these songs. Thank God it happened, because it gave us some great songs. But that's really what it was. And she was she was the Susan that broke up with him when he wrote the song, And so, that was the last. He gave us Hey Baby, They're Playing Our Song and Susan at the same time. We had those two songs, and we actually recorded them at Columbia in New York, and basically in the same session. The basic tracks, and the vocals, and so Susan came to us because of that. Because it was just another song he wrote that was about his ex-girlfriend.
Two interesting song for a number of reasons, not the least of which is there were two different versions of that song, correct? Yeah,
there was the edited version that took out that psychedelic middle section.
What did you think of that? I mean, I'm told that some of the band went, I kind of like it, and some went, nah, not so much.
Well, me, not so much. I like it better than I did when it first came about, because it really became a topic of conversation here. People ask me that all the time, and we talk about it. And back in those days, we would record, come in the studio and we cut a basic track. The basic tracks usually consisted of guitar, bass, and drums, or piano, bass, and drums. Maybe guitar and piano, bass, and you would just get your basic track down, and then you would do your vocal tracks. You do your lead vocal and the background vocals and whatever. And we were so busy at the time, we would be out on the road touring, and we'd do our what we needed to do in the studio, and we'd take off, and then Gercio would finish up with the sweetening. And the sweetening, of course, is any horns or strings, and of course mixing it, EQing it, getting all the sounds right, and then of course they had to master it and so forth. So we weren't always around for the final process of the recording, because we just didn't have the time once we did our part. So when we did Susan, there were like so many bars of just empty click track at the end, and we kept saying to Gercio, Jimmy, what's going on in here? What are we doing? And he says, don't worry about it. I got this idea. I'm going to do this, and you guys will be surprised. You'll hear it. Okay. So we went back on tour, and I think we were in upstate New York, and we were at a friend's house when they delivered, back in those days before our digital age of doing everything and wave files and everything, we would get a test pressing, a disc, that came to us. So we put it on our friend's turntable, and we thought, oh, wow, this sounds great. We loved what he did with the horns and strings. The mix was nice. The EQ'd nice. Then all of a sudden it gets to that part, and whoa, what the...
Is this day in the life by the Beatles, or what?
Yeah, what? Is that what he's thinking? I don't know. And then it comes out of this, craziness, and back into the love, and we were like, what the heck, And we put it out. At first, we thought maybe there was a flaw in the acetate, the test pressing, but we played it again. It did the same thing. So that was his idea, and that's how it came out. And, as a lot of radio stations edited that out. It just went straight from the bridge, And, the Girl I Love You, right into the Love Love. They just, I guess Columbia put out a edited version of it, and which of course is the way we perform it on stage. I mean, we don't try to duplicate that. We go right into the. So it became a topic of conversation. It was kind of interesting, and I to this day I'm not 100% sure what Curcio had in mind and what he was thinking when he did that, but that's what came about, and
Interesting.
and when we did the Ed Sullivan show, they left that in, and they cut to us do it like this goofiness on the beach, goofing around, and it was almost like a scene from a Monkees episode,
Right.
that was going on, and so it was there.
So when you do Sullivan, I mean, is that a lip sync back then?
No, what we used to do back then is we had a pre-recorded track. The instruments were really tracked, and the vocals were all live.
Oh, good.
So the lead vocal and the backgrounds, those were live. But the instruments, they just didn't have. It wasn't that we couldn't play it. It's just, I don't know. They just didn't have the technology to get it to sound good. To pick everything up. I mean, I going back to that show we talked about, all-time hits. Oh God, the sound was terrible because they didn't know how to record in a rock band. I mean, they kept telling us to turn down. And, before you know it, I wasn't even on number one on my guitar. And John was barely tapping on his drums. And, we wanted to slam and play the songs out, and they wouldn't let us do that. They just, it's so different than today. I mean, the technology today is, everything sounds fantastic, but we just didn't have that, So the only way we could do that, Ed Sullivan, was to do the vocals live, but leave the tracks on recorded.
And I have to imagine, in the studio back then, as you mentioned, they carefully mix everything, and I have to. First of all, it has to be. You have to have a very good ear, of course, very special talent. But back then, was it interesting? Mixing those songs. I mean, the technology, we're talking AM radios and car speakers in a lot of cases. So don't you have to kind of mix your song to sound great in that environment?
Are you talking about the process of mixing songs?
No, what I'm saying, I guess, is that, the end product is going to be played over, it's not going to be FM radio and high tech. It's going to be car speakers and radio. So ultimately, when you're in the studio, you got to mix it to sound great over that.
Well, to begin with, everything was mono, and which there's something to be said about that because it had a lot of punch. They get watered down when you start playing around with all the stereo mixes and everything, and those mono mixes. And they used to mix on small speakers that kind of simulated or sounded like the speakers in your car. Right. They would go back and forth. I mean, you would have several sets of speakers and going on in the studio so you could listen to it in different environment, different sounds. But they would also bring it down to listening to it on a set of small stereo, not stereo, but mono speakers,
right.
To see what it sounds like, and that's what you would do. You wanted it to, because you knew that the majority of kids are going to be listening in their cars or on their transistor radios or whatever. They didn't have what we have today, and so that was a big part of it, and it had quite a punch to it. I've listened through the years. I don't know, like at Columbia, who still owns our masters and puts out our music. There have been many different people and many different products that have come out with different mixes. And these young guys that in their A&R departments, I don't think they have a clue what the records were supposed to sound like. So I hear some weird mixes sometimes with our songs when they bring a compilation album out or something else, and they're just not, they're watered down sometimes, in instruments, because they're multi-tracked. And even I think Kind of a Drag was recorded on an 8-track machine, but Don't You Care and On was 16 tracks. And so they don't know, they're mixing it by their ears, and sometimes the things aren't in the right place, or they don't sound like they should, and that's always a problem to me. I wish somebody would call me up and say, "Hey, why don't you come in here and mix this for us?"
Well, and you have a whole different generation mixing this, and the taste, everything's different, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's they're hearing it differently, and they don't know. You think they would at least go back to the original recordings and listen to them,
Start with that.
Okay, this is, let's start at this point.
Can I make it better? And if so, how? But probably not.
Yeah. So that's, I wish we had more control, but, we don't. I don't have control over that, unfortunately, I don't own the masters, and it is what it is.
After all of your charting success, Carl, Susan is released, another hit. The band breaks up. Say it ain't so, Joe. What happened?
Well, what happened. I would probably say it's a very typical story that so many different artists could tell. There's not one thing that made that happen. Several things happened at the same time. One of the major things is that pop music, our music, what we were doing, we went from AM to FM almost overnight. Right. And there was a different sound coming in. It was a heavier underground. So all of a sudden there were artists like Janis Joplin and Santana and Cream and Jimi Hendrix. And some of the pop bands they were just kind of being left behind, and people were moving on, and the records were getting longer, and there were more concept albums. We tried putting out our album Portraits, which I think is a masterpiece. It was a great album, but it didn't have a lot of commercial success. So that was changing quite a bit. You had Monterey Pop Festival, Woodstock. Things were,
sure.
The pop groups like us and Gary Puckett and the Turtles and Tommy James even, and we were even the Beach Boys. It was that was changing a lot. And then you had a lack of interest in what I don't want. Maybe that's the wrong word to use. There was enthusiasm for doing other things. And Dennis Tufano and Dennis was the lead singer, and him and I decided to start a duo, and write. We started, writing. We were songwriters that started coming up with material that we wanted to record, and we were falling into that singer-songwriter bag, like Crosby, Stills and Nash, Carole King, James Taylor. We wanted to do that. We were looking for that more personal sound and something that's a little more simplified and more acoustic. And so that we did that. We put that together, and we started playing venues around Chicago. It was almost like starting over. We were playing small venues and building up a little bit of a following, and then eventually we attracted the great Lou Adler, who was a god in the business at the time. He produced the Mamas and Papas back in the day, and several other artists. And of course, he just came off of the biggest album of all time, Carole King's album Tapestry.
Oh,
God. He produced that.
Wow.
And that was his artist and his album on Ode Records. So our original drummer John Polis switched from drumming to becoming a manager and to managing, and he managed us, and he sent Lou Adler a demo we did of a song that I wrote, a song called Music Everywhere, and Lou loved the song. He wanted to sign us right away. So we went out to L.A. and sat down in the studio. Carole King was just finishing up a session, and we sat down with two guitars and our vocals and turned the mics on and played our repertoire of songs. And, as we were playing our songs, people were coming in and out. Carole King was there. I think James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, different people were just in and out and listening. And so that worked out really good. He signed us. And before you knew it, I think it was around 1971 or 2, we did our first album with Lou. Lou Adler produced it, the Tufano and Giammarese album.
Correct.
And, we had some success. That song I mentioned, Music Everywhere, it got on the charts, but it only made it up to around number 60 on the charts, And we wound up doing 3 albums between 1971 and 76. We did 3 albums with Ode and Lou. And we never had the success that we had with the Buckinghams. But Dennis and I had a great experience because we were out in L.A. a lot at that time and worked in the studio with some of the finest musicians around L.A. at that time, and Tom Scott and the L.A. Express and all these different people. And it was a great experience, that was very rewarding and really a fun thing to do. But like I said, unfortunately, we didn't have the success. We wound up breaking that up around 1976, and that was that, But you asked me what happened with the Buckinghams. Well, people started, the business was changing, and we were all trying to do different things and expanding, and the 60s thing, thank God it came around again in 1980. I mean, it just all of a sudden, 60s was back, and our audience wanted to hear their music again, and that's when
you get a call from Chicago's WLS Radio with an invitation to reunite, shall I say, the Buckinghams for the Mayor's Chicago Fest event in August, I believe.
Yeah, the Chicago Fest at Navy Pier. And the program director of WLS Radio, his name was John Guerin. John called me and he said, "Is there any chance you guys could get back together for a reunion?" And at first it was like, well, I don't know, I wanted to, but I wasn't sure it could be done. So I started talking. I talked to Nick Fortuna. Nick was up for it. He was in a place where he could do it. Mm-hmm. And Dennis Tufano was out in L.A., but he was doing various things and pursuing an acting career too. But he said, "Yeah, I could come in and do that." And then I tried Marty Greb, who was our original keyboard player, but at the time he was playing with Chicago, so that didn't work out with him. And of course, our drummer John Polis had passed away just months before we did this. He passed away. I think it was the end of March of 1980 when he passed on, and so he was obviously not going to be there for us. And so what we did was the 3 of us got together with a couple other musicians and rehearsed a couple weeks, and we went on Navy Pier to play at the end of the pier, the big concert there, and 12,000 people showed up, and it was just a magical night. And I realized right away, wow, something's going on here. People want to hear these songs again, and so we did the show, and then Dennis came back in again. We played the Park West Theater in Chicago and a couple other venues, and a couple of years there, and then I realized by 82 that, hey, this 60s thing is back, man. Hey, baby, this is back. This is, people want to hear this again. And so I tried to keep it together with me, Nick, and Dennis, but Dennis was just not interested in touring again at that point. He had a lot going on in LA, and so Nick and I decided, hey, people want to hear these songs again. They want to see some originality in the group. Let's give it a shot and see what happens. So here we are about 40-some years later, and went on to do Chicago. We played all over. We did the Happy Together tour in '85, which was about 5 months long, and kept going ever since, and playing theaters and venues and all different kinds of venues and cruises and whatever.
Wasn't that about the time that you took over the lead vocals, right? About 84, 85?
Yeah, so around 82 it was, Nick said to me, he says, "Well, you know what? he says, you and Nick, I memean, you and Dennis are very similar. I mean, we were a duo, Dennis and I, for years, and we had a lot of similarity in our sound. And he says, well, why don't you just sing lead? And I thought, well, I don't know. It just feels a little weird to me, you know. But I agreed to give it a shot. So we did it, and it worked out. You know, I just, and I will admit it was a little bit tense for a while there, because I had been a guitar player always. And to set the guitar down and be the singer and you know, what do I do with my hands? You know, it's you know,
awkward.
But I caught on, you know, and it was good. I still play. In our show, you know, we do a 75, 90-minute show. I'll play guitar on maybe about 5 songs. You know. But you know, I'm mainly out there singing lead, and it worked out. People accepted that, and you know, Dennis Tufano and I are still dear friends. And as a matter of fact, we have been
February 16th.
February 16th, the Rock Gods Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Is inducting us into their Hall of Fame, and we're pretty excited about that. It's an online Hall of Fame that we were voted in by our peers, who are some very prominent musicians and artists that are part of that. And so Tufano's coming in. Nick will be here. We're going to do a few songs together. We'll receive our awards. So, you know, they honor you individually too, which is kind of interesting, you know, opposed to just the Buckinghams themselves. You know, it's more than that. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be an exciting night. And like I said, it's in Chicago, in Rosemont, Illinois, at a place called Joe's Live, which is a beautiful club. It's a pretty big establishment. So it's a really nice venue. So we'll be doing that on February 16th. You know,
huge honor. And at the same time, well, first of all, you're coming off the car show. Then you're doing that, and at the same time, you're juggling and finalizing an upcoming release of original music EP. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you know, I am really excited about, you know, I'll be honest, I don't have any disillusion here of having hits again, you know. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's always nice to think about that something you do will go viral, it'll take off, it'll be a big hit.
It happens.
But it can happen, I guess, and I've done a couple things, and this will be the first time since social media has really taken off now to be able to do something like this. I'm about 7 songs, wanting to do a 10-song album here. Seven songs are finished, and I love to write, and I love to record. And I am caught up in this whole new way of recording. I mean, I miss the days of being in the studio with a bunch of musicians and friends and doing tracks. But that's not the way anybody works anymore. You know, I have some dear friends in Chicago that are very talented, and some that are not in Chicago, that we go back and forth with wave files, and I ask them hey, can you do a vocal part for me? This is what I'm looking for. And you know, I'll send them a chart. I'll send them what I want. We'll go back and forth. They'll send it back to me with the parts I need. I assemble it. I've got a great engineer who knows how to mix and EQ the songs and master them. His name is Larry Millis. He works for Jim Peterick, who Jim, as you know, is the Ides. And Jim is a very, very talented guy who's written some great songs. Eye of the Tiger, for one, and Vehicle is another one. But so Larry Millis works for him, and he's part of the Ides of March, one of the originals. So Larry works with me as far as assembling these songs together. And we have come up with some beautiful tracks. I mean, they just sound really good. And, you know, right now I'm thinking the album's going to be called There Comes a Time, and that's one of the tracks on there.
I like it.
And there's a great singer in Chicago. His name is Dave Mikulskis, and he's just a wonderful singer. And I've had a few other musicians join me, And then there's a lady friend who's a very talented singer who you mentioned earlier.
Kiki Epson, or no?
Yeah, Kiki Epson. Kiki
gotcha.
Epson.
Yeah.
Buddy Epson's daughter. And, she's a very talented, not only piano player, but great singer. And so she's joining me on a couple songs and doing some of the vocals. And it's great to work with her. She's in L.A. and of course, I've been in close touch with her with the fires going on there. I'm just so devastating. I'm just so sad and feel so bad for these people, what they're going through. But anyway, she's helping me out and doing some things for me. So I'm excited to make new music. That's my life. I'm proud of the Buckinghams, and I keep going with that. But I also enjoy just being creative and getting in my studio and making some new songs and new music, and I'm excited for you to hear it when it's done.
Good. The duet you did with Kiki was the top 100 of 2024 for Goldmine Magazine's fabulous flip sides. So that's you're on the right track, Carl. You're on the right track.
Yeah, well, I'm amazed. Kiki came in to Chicago this past summer to do. There's a theater up in Wisconsin, and I got her in to do this thing. She does a tribute to Joni Mitchell too, and so she really covers Joni well. I mean, it's just really good. I mean, nobody could be. Joni is. I love Joni Mitchell. I mean, I'm a big fan of hers, and I connected a little bit with her when I was Tufano and Giammarese when I was in L.A. But she does such a great job of doing Joni's songs. And I was glad I was able to come out and do a few songs with her on stage, Joni Mitchell songs, when she came in to do that show. So, yeah, that's Circle Game was a fun thing to do with her. And I hope to, and she's singing with me on a couple of my originals, too. So it's going to be fun. That's going to be great.
What tour dates are on your immediate horizon? Are you doing Happy Together? Any cruises coming up?
Well, we're not doing a cruise again until 26. Oh, I take that back. September of 25, we're doing an Alaskan cruise.
Perfect.
Yeah, and looking forward to that. That's in September. Coming up immediately, we've got there's the Genesee Theater in Waukegan, Illinois, outside of Chicago. It's beautiful theater, great place to play. We do our American pop show with the Grassroots and the Box Tops, and that's on February 7th. And then the 23rd, I think we're up near Orlando and Wearsville. There's a theater up there that we're playing near Orlando, and then the State Theater in Easton, Pennsylvania on the 28th, if I remember correctly. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I'm not looking at the list. But there's several dates. I would encourage everybody to go to www.thebuckinghams.com.
Yes.
And the first thing that comes up is our schedule.
Nice.
We designed it so people see that easily. It's the first thing you see on the website. And also check out the Buckinghams on our Facebook page, because I'm always putting new stuff up there, and I'm on there now talking about some of the different events and the things that are going on. And so we have I'm so blessed that I have people working with me that not only a great band that these guys have been with me for many years now. Tom Shekel on the drums, Bruce Soberoff on keyboards, over 30 years with these guys, and Dave Zane for 16 years on guitar and vocals. And then our advanced person, Susan Rakes, who has advanced dates for me and does our merchandise and does so many different things. She's been a great person. And then Dawn Lee Wakefield is our publicist.
She's the best.
And she's been really working at the YouTube and Facebook and bugging me constantly to keep doing this and doing that. You got to do this. She'll write an article, and I got so involved now with it because she would send me copy that was 2 pages long or 3-page line. And I'm going, man, I can't memorize this.
Right.
I have this taped up on my computer, and it looks kind of stupid. I'm moving my head back and forth trying to read. So I went out and bought a teleprompter.
Oh, perfect.
And it works beautifully, because then I can just watch the stuff scroll in front of me.
Sure.
And read it, and it comes off like I'm a news person, who's knows what he's doing, but it's fun, it's fun doing that. So it's all going great so far,
Carl,
Years.
I am beyond grateful that you spent an hour of your evening with us. I so appreciate it. I so admire and respect you, your talents, your history, your future, the Buckinghams, and thank you for being a big part of the program.